Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to the closing plenary of the Apprenticeship PHL 2021 Symposium. It's been such a ride to come along with you as we go through all of these different great conversations to really provide some insight into apprenticeship, the work of apprenticeship, all of the great people that are involved in how to build that network that's really critical for us to move things forward. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the Whova chat and let us know who you are so that you can interact with others. If you're not familiar with Apprenticeship PHL, we are a public-private regional collaborative that really works toward developing and expanding registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship across the region to benefit both our residents as well as our employers. And Apprenticeship PHL has over 17 member organizations that really build this ecosystem to help apprenticeships and communities thrive. So what does Apprenticeship PHL do? We basically support with outreach and education activities such as the one that you are joining today. We also support employers who are interested in registering an apprenticeship, go through that process and provide technical assistance to those seeking to do that. We also pursue funding opportunities, and because partnership is the lifeblood of apprenticeship, we foster connections and partnerships across the region. Since connection is really our theme here, we chose Whova as a platform because it allows you to connect with each other. So if you want to, after the session, go ahead and click on the attendees. You can see everybody who's joining. And if you find somebody who seems to be the type of person you want to connect with based on their background experience or relationships, you can go ahead and send them a message, start a video call, and connect. You can also post on the community chat to start a conversation. The platform will be available for 3 months after this symposium ends. So if you have something that you wanted to share there, it'll be available for folks. We've had over 278 people register for the symposium. It's been really amazing to see so many folks joining us. And then just a bit of housekeeping. So attendees are muted with cameras off throughout the session. The session is being recorded and will be available for you after this it's over. And please utilize the chat and Q&A features in Whova so that you can engage and interact with our amazing presenters. If you want to connect with us, please go ahead and do so. We are on all sorts of social media, and thank goodness for Cassandra Shavney, who is live tweeting our conversation for today using the hashtag APHL 2021. Lastly, if you do want to have a conversation and connect with APHL more directly, on the chat, you will see a link that you can use to schedule a time to meet with us. You can just say when you're available and we'll schedule some time and have a conversation, see where things fit. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. I'm so excited about the extraordinary panel that we've got today. I'm going to pass over to our extraordinary President and CEO, Patrick Clancy. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks, Maria. And thank you, Maria and Cassandra. What a week. You know, what a different idea of trying to spread out really good knowledge and really good content over a period of time. I think in this new Zoom world, we're all sort of getting used to it a little bit. And I think it was a genius idea not to load it all up in 1 or 2 days, but really to spread it out. So I just want to take a quick thank you moment for Maria and Cassandra for doing a phenomenal job. Maria only joined us most recently. So talk about hitting the ground running. We are thrilled to have both Maria and Cassandra. So I'm Patrick Clancy, President and CEO of Philadelphia Works. It is my distinct pleasure to hang out with really smart people today. Like I am like the luckiest guy, besides the fact that it's Friday, but I get to hang out with Sheila Ireland and Eric Selesnow. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick off some questions that we think are most important, with the goal being, you know, how do we really explain the value of pre-apprentice and apprenticeship? And what do we see it as an investment? So from a workforce board perspective, I'm going to dive into that a little bit, but you know, the brains of a lot of innovative things throughout the country really come from Sheila and Eric. So the value of going first, I can embarrass them. So happy to do that. So Sheila, I will hand it off to you to start.
Good morning, everyone. Pat, Pat is a dangerous person to have on a panel with you, right, as well. We spend far too much time together, and so I think this will be an interesting conversation. Eric, I apologize in advance. For everyone that's attending, I'm Sheila Ireland. I serve as the Deputy Secretary for Workforce Development for the Department of Labor and Industry for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Obviously, the State Apprenticeship and Training Office reports into my deputate, and apprenticeship is the center of where we think workforce should be going in the future. So, Eric.
Can you guys hear me?
We can. It's a
You
little
got
bit
an
of
echo.
we're getting a little
All right.
echo, unless
All
that's
right,
just you
I'll
on a
get rid of
Friday.
that echo. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. I know you've had, oh boy. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, bye-bye, Eric.
Yeah, what happened?
Come on back, Eric. We're not going to ask you any really hard questions. We do know you have a wealth of experience at many different levels. We also know that you have a chance to give us a little bit of an insight where you think maybe the Biden administration will go with apprenticeships. But now that you're back, we'll let you do the formal introduction again. And hopefully this won't, you know, reverberate like the last one did.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
Perfect.
There we go, great. Well, great. Hey, congratulations, Apprenticeship Philadelphia, and to the board and all those folks. You've got a great collaboration and partnership regionally, one of the better ones in the country. So I just want to compliment Philadelphia for that work, and, you know, compliment, you know, the state, and also, you know, the workforce board in Philadelphia. Workforce boards are very uneven across the country about their knowledge and engagement with apprenticeship. So we're really happy to see Philadelphia doing that work, and that you've been doing it for a while and trying to figure it out. So congrats. You know, this is an interesting time, right? This transformation of apprenticeship, in my view, not in my view, the facts are, you know, in 2014, when Obama first mentioned it in the State of the Union address, to double and diversify registered apprenticeships, not only double the numbers, but also diversify, not only with the types of people we engage in apprenticeship, women, people of color, people with disabilities, et cetera, but also the diversity of industries and occupations. And I know that's something in Philly you guys are really looking at, you and your partners look at, you know, from 1199's programs in behavioral health, which is sort of a new twist in apprenticeship, to IT, to advanced manufacturing, to healthcare, to a range of new things. Couple of interesting things, right? So yes, we have a new president in town, and you know, the last two presidents, Obama and even the Trump administration, supported apprenticeships. But if you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been $1 billion invested in apprenticeship by the feds, right? There's been an appropriation by Congress, which started at 90 million in 2016 when I was still at Labor, and is up to 185 million for this next year. There is in DC, that many of you may heard, and we have a blog about it on our website, but the House Education and Workforce Committee just voted to approve, in a kind of bipartisan way, a revision of the National Apprenticeship Act of 1937 that really has governed the registered apprenticeship system. And that just got passed Friday. And so now it's on to the House. But what that bill does is it really modernizes the National Apprenticeship Act. It starts out putting $400 million into the nation's apprenticeship system, and has the ability to go up to over $1 billion over 5 years. There's money in there for states, money in there for locals. And it's a focus on not just registered apprenticeship, but pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, and registered apprenticeship. It is totally silent on these things called IRAP, so it doesn't even mention them, approve them, or indicate them. So we'll put that to the side for right now to see what the new administration does with that. But it really is focusing on the gold standard of registered apprenticeship. And the really cool thing about it, for us who've been, in the trenches for many years, Cheryl, Pat, Sheila, me, is, the interest on Capitol Hill in apprenticeship. I mean, incredible interest that is very bipartisan for the most part. And just, look, they never had these conversations about apprenticeship. Apprenticeship was a stepchild of the system for many years.
Right.
When I first went to DOL, the budget for the Office of Apprenticeship was like $27 million a year, which is a rounding error in federal budgeting. And then since then, and that's for a national system, that was hardly anything. So, John Ladd and his team at DOL and DC, they were quietly doing their work for many, many years without much attention. And then it sort of got lifted up to this transformation period. So now they have a lot of money. There's money floating around every year. Congress is involved and engaged. Since when, for you guys who've been around a while, has any president uttered the words apprenticeship out of their mouth? I mean, Bill Clinton did a little bit with youth apprenticeship, and even the first George Bush did, but it never stuck. Well, here we are now about 6 or 7 years in, after all sorts of engagement around the system, major investments, major grants, potential legislation. So there's a lot happening in DC, right?
So
And
Eric, what do you think is the timeline? So I know that we're looking at, we're now in February. So when you say all these investments, I'm curious at the local level, and maybe Sheila has insight to this as well. Like, when do you think money could possibly move?
Well, there's, because there's so much apprenticeship related money flowing through DOL, it will move pretty quickly, right? And so, get on your grants.gov mailing lists or whatever. There's a number of grants, contracts, and special projects that'll be coming out. I mean, there's no secret here. There was some money that came out last year. It was a number of H-1B grants. And so we'll have to see, and those H-1B grants focused on registered, non-registered. We prefer they focused on registered. But there'll be stuff coming out. I mean, the Department of Labor's got to spend $185 million per the congressional appropriation. Per the congressional appropriation, they can only spend it on registered programs. So there will be some things coming out. Just keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
I'm sure John and his team will do some contracts, which are a lot different than grants. And I'm sure there'll be some grants coming out, and then they'll have to determine what their H-1B money. The real thing to keep an eye on, Pat, I think, is something I think we mentioned the other day, is what is the Biden administration going to do? Now, if you look at Biden's materials, there's, manufacturing in America, real focus on that, $50 billion invested in workforce training, greater partnerships with the unions, because he's got a long history of unions, involvement and connections and support. But not only unions, I want to be clear about that. But there is, Joe got it during the last administration. He was a chief marketer. Cheryl has spent some time with him talking about that. We'll never forget that meeting, right, Cheryl? With Biden back in 2016. But he gets it, and he gets workforce. And, his wife is a community college professional, and she has an interest in this too. So I'm looking for some really good things coming out. And then, the new labor secretary is Marty Walsh from Boston, former mayor of Boston. I worked with a mayor before, then became governor. Mayors know workforce, right? They know people say, Mayor, I need a job. Well, go see my workforce, go down to the one-stop center, whatever. So, we got Marty Walsh coming into the Department of Labor. Former ambassador to Switzerland, Susie Lavine, and former labor commissioner in Washington, is now the deputy assistant secretary, my old position at DOL, and she's leading ETA for the moment until they get settled down. So there's a lot of people there who know apprenticeship and get apprenticeship. And of course, kudos to the Office of Apprenticeship. I'm sure Jim Fode's probably on the call somewhere, and his team in the regional office.
Jim is great. We love Jim.
Yeah.
We love Jim. So Sheila, what do you think? So when you look at this crystal ball of opportunity, what do you see from the state's perspective?
So it's really interesting because, I'll tag on to a couple things that Eric said, right? Apprenticeship is a natural outcome, unfortunately, of the pandemic, right? We're looking at record unemployment. And then I just looked at some projections that I think, Pat, you and I talked about the other day, that said that they expect that even with the vaccination, that unemployment will still lie around 5.7% and really won't drop below 5 for another year or so at the most. And so once we exhaust UC benefits, like whether we like it or not, there will be an end, to unemployment compensation and the surpluses. We've got to have earn and learn models available for folks so that they can transition into the jobs that we know they need to be in and have the financial supports in order to do so. I think in addition to what you see coming from the federal government, if you're looking at the back to work PA proposal that Governor Wolf put out last week that talked about putting $3 billion into workforce development and to economic development, you see registered apprenticeships at the heart of that, right? Because there's a clear understanding around how successful those programs have been and where we need to invest those dollars. And so for me, it becomes this thing of we've got to be ready, and so what you're doing this week to really inform Philadelphia around where we need to go, what we need to do, the position we need to be in, we need to be ready. Because to Eric's point and to Governor Wolf's point, there's a lot of money coming and we have to be positioned to effectively utilize it, I believe.
Yeah. So, good, Eric. I'm so you're ready to jump in again.
No, that's good. Go ahead.
Okay. No. Okay. Well, I can. All right. Make a chance to do a couple questions. I love asking you guys questions, by the way. Like I said, really smart people. And Eric, you didn't really do, I don't think, a good enough job explaining your background, right? So we bantered back and forth, and everybody's like, "Wow, that guy looks really smart." But for the sake of the audience, can you just give the breadth of your experience? Because I think it is truly amazing, right? And we appreciate your time today because I know how busy you are, along with Sheila.
Yeah.
But why don't you give people your background so when they hear you, they're like, "Oh, that's the guy."
Okay. So looking smart, I don't get that much, Pat. And typically I get that he looks better in the dark. But regarding that, I'm an old guy who's been in workforce for many, many years. I worked in prisons and jails for about 24 years. And then transitioned over to the workforce system in about 2001. I ran a local workforce board like Mr. Clancy does, and then I ran a state workforce board. Us workforce board people, we were the workforce police. We had to be involved and run everything. And I learned some valuable lessons from that experience, which is workforce boards can be terrific partners. They don't have to lead every single thing and do all that work. I then worked for the National Skills Coalition doing state policy. And then finally, I was dragged over to the Department of Labor as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Secretary Tom Perez during the Obama administration. And after on Inauguration Day in 2017, when I became a dislocated worker, took a little time off and then landed at JFF, where we started our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And we've raised a lot of money and we're doing a lot of work around the country with employers, colleges, workforce boards, community-based organizations. We're even doing some work on the ground in Philly, and that's been great. And then we stole a fellow by the name of Mark Genoa from Philadelphia, and he's with us now. So I've been around, and look, I'm not an on the ground apprenticeship practitioner like many of you are. I've only been in it for the last 7 years. I mean, I worked in it in my workforce days, but it was only to connect with the unions. But now we have a much bigger, broader vision that apprenticeship can, it's not your grandfather's apprenticeship system anymore. I think many of your conversations this week sort of focused on that, right? It's totally different. And I'll give you a little data points, Pat, that I find fascinating, right? Because there's so much myth and mysticism and mystery and misperception about apprenticeship. You look at the number of new apprenticeship programs that have been developed the last, let's just say 2 years, right? 90% of them are non-union, non-building trades programs.
Wow.
Now the building trades and the unions have, led the way to this point, right? It's not like, oh, we just found it, we created our own thing. No, this process and system is built on the successes of the labor movement, which didn't use any government funds, right? They're a perfect example of an intermediary with labor councils and, supply and demand and employer driven. I mean, those are the best things, but to build on that. And, I remember President Obama saying, gosh, if it works so good in the trades and the data is so good, why can't we use the same model for other occupations such as healthcare and IT and, all those different things that we do. So,
Yeah.
So that
It
was
is
my
exciting. And I think that is, this is where, Cheryl has played an amazing role, Cheryl Feldman, developing apprenticeships at the local level, statewide level. But I'm going to jump back to Sheila now. So Sheila, the state has its own apprenticeship office, right? So can you talk a little bit about what's the strategy at the state level to help, build apprenticeships statewide?
So, as you saw from the last PA Smart Grant Awards, right, we're focusing in 3 specific areas, right? So traditional apprenticeships, to Eric's point, labor unions led the way specifically with apprenticeships, but we're also moving into non-traditional, to Eric's point, where we are understanding that the apprenticeship model specifically works across a number of industries. And then maybe the most exciting, I think, that people are investing in is the ambassador network, because we think it's a best kept secret. And we're not sure that everyone understands that apprenticeship has changed, to Eric's point, and that model is applicable across the board. It's enormously attractive to folks who want to join apprenticeship programs, and that employers as well need to, I think, have ambassadors that can demonstrate to them the value of that investment in their human capital.
Right.
An apprenticeship program is not a new idea, but we seem to have lost somewhere along the line this idea of investment in our employees.
Right.
Unions have been great at it, but not so much in the non-union space. And I think if you look at the return on investment of apprenticeship programs to employers and participants, there's no question that it's a win-win for both.
Yeah.
And so for us, as we continue to expand, so, we put out our PA Smart Grant Awards after a much unanticipated delay, thanks to COVID, but right now we have $2.1 million that we're putting towards registering 800 new apprenticeships across the state. That's the next thing you'll see coming out from the deputy. Internal to the Commonwealth, there's this idea that we haven't done a good enough job of understanding how to build apprenticeships across industries and how to leverage our internal relationships to be able to do that. So we have talks ongoing with the Department of Energy, right around clean jobs, with agriculture around how we can move into different spaces with apprenticeships in agriculture as well. Manufacturing, of course, is at the top of our list in terms of how do we support their apprenticeship models, especially those that encourage them to use newer, for lack of a better word, human capital development strategies that really broaden the base of workers that they can have coming into what are frankly very good family sustaining wages and technical skills that there is a definite dearth of in our labor market.
Right.
So those are the kind of spaces that we're thinking about moving into with apprenticeship, or I shouldn't say thinking, but moving into with apprenticeship. But it just echoes some of the things that we've been talking about, the need to think about it in very different ways. Also, I guess lastly, we have an MOU, LNI, DCED, with Germany to really do an investigation of apprenticeships. Because, as much as we glorify the model coming out of Germany, we know they're having some disconnects as well. And we're trying to learn from them how to do the work better. So that's what we're thinking about at the conference.
So I'm gonna throw you guys a little curveball. That's what I do. So COVID's been the ultimate curveball for us, trying to figure out, how do we come out of COVID stronger and better? And what would be, Eric, what are some of the strategies you think can be employed, after COVID, or as we begin to get on the other side? I don't want to say things like it's turning the corner, because that was an unused statement a long time ago. But I think we want to look at how do we come out of COVID stronger than before when it comes to apprenticeships, and how do you see things happening that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it should be on all of our minds. There is no question that COVID has impacted the growth and expansion of apprenticeship, particularly youth apprenticeship, and hopefully we can spend a couple of minutes later talking about that, Pat. It stopped many of these youth programs in their tracks. But it's uneven across the country. A lot of companies are continuing to hire in manufacturing, for example. Some are hiring in healthcare because of COVID. Some are not because of COVID, and they're too damn busy. But none of us have ever seen anything like this before. So what's the answer? Let me first say that as much as I love apprenticeship, it is not the answer to every workforce problem, right? So there's a lot of really good workforce problems that your team does, the workforce programs that your team does, that the community-based organizations do, that all of these regional connectors, JVS and everybody else does, right? So that's good. However, when apprenticeship is applied and used, you're going to get better retention rates, better wages. If you can align it and attach it to Whova, you're going to get better performance outcomes and what have you. But now, is apprenticeship the solution to COVID? I mean, a lot of policymakers, apprenticeship's going to create jobs. No, it doesn't. We all know, and I think we all agree, employers lead this thing, right? We're just the facilitators of bringing people together. So, what we have to do is convince employers that, especially those who complain that they're not getting people with the skills that they need, we have to convince them that as part of recovery, you can really build your workforce, build your next generation workforce, because a lot of companies are going to be changing after COVID with apprenticeship. And you know what? Maybe it's not apprenticeship. Maybe it's a work-based learning play. Maybe it's, OJT through Whova. Maybe it's something else, right? But apprenticeship, you're talking about the gold standard, highest quality, rigor, standards, and to convince employers that if you're going to build your recovery workforce, use apprenticeship. I would also say that given the country's consciousness about race and equity, that you can also, I think, use apprenticeship more and better than almost any workforce program to drive that value in your programs, right? So you can target community-based organizations, workforce boards, and other recruitments from those communities. There's some companies that use apprenticeship simply to increase the diversity and equity within their organizations. So, there's a lot of opportunities, and, it's a long way of saying that, it's not the solution for everybody, but we've really, and I've always said during downtimes is now the time to make partnerships and relationships with employers, explaining to them how apprenticeship works, listening to them, listening to what their needs are, what the labor market is going to look like, and what's going to grow in Philly, in the next 2 to 3 years, what's going to come back big time, So there's lots of ways to use apprenticeship, I think, to drive recovery, but it continues to be not only a sales issue, if you will, but a listening issue to what employers really need. And we should always be doing that in our sector work, our career pathway work, through that with apprenticeship.
Yeah. So Sheila, I know that. So Sheila, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let me respond to one thing there, though, right? Because I would say, it's not all bad news, right? So who said it? I don't think it was you, Pat, but it was somebody in one meeting we were in that said, let's not let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
Because the reality is that because we have had to shift and in some ways modernize apprenticeship, what we see coming through the council is more learning that's based on virtual platforms, just because we don't have the ability to do in person. And what does that do? That broadens our footprint for the number of people that we can serve. Right. So there are whole deserts in Pennsylvania that we can't get to because it's an in-person component that has to be addressed. Does everyone need that? That would be number one. And then number two, for organizations that have gotten comfortable not investing in professional development to the point where they don't understand how to do it, here's a ready-made model for it, right? That brings up that whole function in your organization so that you can get the talent that you need, as opposed to looking out in the market and trying to figure out how to get it. I mean, grow your own. And apprenticeship is the perfect model for that. And I think it's risen to the fore in the conversation both at the federal and the state level because it is the solution.
So Sheila, you've had an amazing career so far, and I'm just going to dip a little back into your many different roles and responsibilities you've had throughout your career. And one was an HR director, right? You actually developed programs. Why is it so hard for businesses to do some of this development? Like, you are the HR person. So what do you think? If you had a chance to go back to HR, which we hope you don't, and you stay in your current role forever.
Nothing personal.
Or maybe you'll run for, are you running for governor or you're running
but we're not,
or Senate? So which one of those three? So, we'll discuss that later. I could actually be your chairman of your committee. But anyway, not to totally go down that road, but how would you convince an employer to make this investment? Because now you've been on both sides of the table.
Yeah. So it's a tough conversation. So I'll share a couple of perspectives, right? When you are the HR director who is responsible for staffing, and especially in an organization with high turnover, right? And you're considered a cost center, right? In your organization's, financial profile, you have a lot of constraints on you, right? So my job as an HR director is to limit liability first and foremost. That means I'm going to use whatever credentials on paper to justify whatever hiring that I do. I'm going to use every screening mechanism that I have in place to understand whether that 30-minute, 45-minute interview is really getting me the person that is not going to damage my organization, right? Secondly, if I'm a cost center, every dollar that I spend, somebody is looking for a return on investment in my organization. And sometimes the return on investment in training is not immediate. Sometimes
Right.
it's long-term, and so organizations that are under the pressure of the profit motive often do not have the latitude to say, well, she's a great employee now, 2-3 years later. They're looking for a cost break-even point that's like 36 months from when I did this training, if not immediately, in some ways. But I think right now, we as organizations, from the HR hat, we painted ourselves into a little bit of a corner here, right? Whereas technology just burgeoned so quickly, we don't have the skill sets in our labor market that we need in order to be competitive.
Right.
And so, but we've been used to buying it on the marketplace, right? But as we haven't kept up, as we haven't had credential attainment catch up, Philly, Pennsylvania, educational attainment, we're below other states around us, right? All of a sudden, we're in this space where we can't get what we need. Smart organizations, big organizations, building their own universities or coupling with universities to get the talent that they need. And so I think what you need to say is, do you want to be in business 3 years from now? Right? And do you understand that the nature of competition now in the business world is that there's a number 1 and 2? And if you look at the financials, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are far distant from 1 and 2, right? It's a war of the giants. And so if you want to continue to be competitive, your workforce has to be competitive. They have to have the current skills. They have to have the technological capabilities to leverage your product and service into the forefront. And that requires investment. And like I said before, apprenticeship for me is just a built model so that they understand how to effectively get into that game. Because if you haven't been in the game, it's a difficult one to get in.
Right. So Eric, there's been a lot of conversation recently, and I think for the last couple of years around pre-apprenticeship, right? So you and I go way back because, Sheila's not that old, but we go way back. And, this idea of pre-apprenticeship is relatively new. And what was worrisome as a board director or working for a board back then is the pre-apprentice was not connected to the apprenticeship opportunities. So what have you seen recently where it will give us confidence that pre-apprentice models that are being developed actually do lead to an apprenticeship? And what have you seen? And give me a little bit of perspective of the value of pre-apprenticeship.
Right. So it's a great question, right?
That's why I'm here, Eric, really. I mean, I'm here to pick your brain, buddy, but that's not really joking.
All right. Well, it was a so-so question. But look, I've said this many times before, and I'll have to clean up my language for this call.
No, you don't.
The history of workforce development in this country is littered with some really poor and mediocre pre-apprenticeship programs, right? The leftovers from, the Great Society and the war on poverty, and everybody cranked out these pre-apprenticeship programs for the last 30 years.
Right. And
they never really went anywhere, right? They never articulated or went to registers for the most part. Some did. But I look at, I did some research looking at, especially what some cities did with this and elsewhere. And, there was a lot of people in this game who didn't really understand how you have to create that pathway into registered apprenticeship. It's particularly troublesome for and we're having some success with this now with opportunity youth who are out of school, out of work, and can't access it. And you give them, you give them a little GED, a little life skills, a little contextual learning, and you hope that they go and join a registered apprenticeship. Well, registered apprenticeship have a lot more quality requirements for that, right? Got to have that high school diploma. You got to have a driver's license in some cases. you've got to have certain skill sets in math and what have you. So, pre-apprenticeship, if it's done well and right, and on JFF's website, we have a framework for pre-apprenticeship that builds on DOLs, which is right. There should be no pre-apprenticeship that doesn't articulate to a registered one. And and you can look at various registered apprenticeships, whether they're for a CNC operator or in the waterworks or in the carpentry trades, and you can backtrack what the pre-work needs to do, right?
Right.
And you might have to do some work with the registered programs and say, what is it that you need? I know you can't guarantee direct placement, although that'd be nice, but if we have somebody who goes through this high quality pre-apprenticeship, will you at least talk to him or her about getting them in, right? So, it has to be organized and structured. It'd be nice if the pre-apprenticeship had a little bit of work-based learning or job shadowing, but it just needs to get them ready for the entry requirements of the registered program, right?
So Eric, what have you seen any pre-apprenticeship through the career and technical programs in high schools? Because when you think logically about pipelines, why couldn't some of our career and technical education programs, be pre-apprenticeships? What would it take for that to happen?
So I have two answers to that. One answer is that yes, it's happening and it's growing. Career and technical education in high schools are growing. It's still a bridge too far for a lot of public education in K through 12, but it's getting better. And we're part of a project, the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, and we see these incredible in-school high quality youth registered apprenticeships going on now. And I know Philly is looking at some of that, right? But, people often say pre-apprenticeship and they say, oh, that's code for youth apprenticeship. No, it's not. You need pre-apprenticeship for these 10 million people who've been laid off, who need to switch industries or occupations and may not have a background in it because they've been with the manufacturing plant for 15, 20 years, right? So, if they're going to switch into something else, they may in fact need to get some pre-work done for 6 months to get some basic skills up before that. But you can use a pre-apprenticeship for adults. You can use it for youth. We're doing a project, Cheryl was participating with us for a while, on apprenticeship pathways for opportunity youth. If you're an adult, you can probably find an apprenticeship program somewhere. If you're in school youth, it's starting to grow. But if you're what we call opportunity youth, 16 to 24, out of school, out of work, you're often out of luck when it comes to apprenticeship. So we've been working to try to build pathways in. One, because they have a right to access apprenticeship too. And two, we need on-ramps for people and also an on-ramp to bring more people with diversity into the system, right? So we need high quality structured pre-apprenticeships that articulate to registered apprenticeships. No more of these half-assed programs, pardon my language.
I like it. It's true.
We've thrown all sorts of stuff at that over the years. And we need to bring up the level of pre-apprenticeship. And in the National Apprenticeship Act that I talked about earlier, they actually cite that in there. So I think that's a good thing. And I'm hoping that DOL, allows some of their grant making and elsewhere to get these models going, because I think there's a lot of people who have access to the opportunities and promise of apprenticeship. There's a whole lot of people who don't and are far away from that.
So Sheila, what's your take on pre-apprenticeship? What do you?
It was so interesting because I agree completely with Eric, and we've seen some real tragedies in that realm, etc. But there's no question that in some instances pre-apprenticeship is necessary. I just unlike the registered apprenticeship, I just don't think we have the quality control, that we need to be able to make sure, one, that it articulates well, and two, is that it's doing what it's saying. I won't call anyone out, but, putting, 50 people in an auditorium for 3 days is not pre-apprenticeship, and you see it over and over again.
Yeah, but Sheila, you guys in Pennsylvania have taken a lead, you and a handful of other states, where you can now register pre-apprenticeship at the state level, right? Which is your quality control, right? And your requirements are that it has to articulate and has to provide certain things. So, states like Pennsylvania that do that's a really big deal. That's a huge innovation in this business. Ohio does it, you do it. I think, and a couple of other states are doing it, and the feds are starting to do it or recognize it somehow. But that recognition of pre-apprenticeship, I think, brings up the system a little bit. So kudos to PA.
So a quick question though. So is the pre-apprenticeship born out of the apprenticeship saying, I don't have enough talent or I don't have a talented pool? Like who should start the conversation? Is it the apprenticeship saying, hey, I want to diversify the pool, or I don't think I'm looking back and I don't see where we're going to continue to get enough people? What have you seen and what makes the most sense? I'm going to let Sheila go first and then Eric, I'll let you chime in. As well.
I think you just articulated the ideal pathway, but that's not always the way it happens, right? And then Pat, the market is convoluted, right? So as you and I have talked about all the time, there's a whole lot of people saying they're pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship. You can't stop them from saying it, right? And I think the consumer is a little bit of a victim here because they don't understand how to figure out which one is the quality program in some ways, and so people will get in wherever they get in, you know what I mean, and call it whatever it is that they call it. But I think part of what you've been doing this week is to really call out the difference between like a registered apprenticeship, you know what I mean, which means there's some quality imbibed in the system, and rather than what we see going on here.
Right. So Eric, how do we push apprenticeships to build these pre-apprenticeships? Like, is not the perfect model that the apprenticeship group is also able to add the appropriate staff to do the pre-apprenticeship, or what would you suggest? So if you were a Department of Labor guy, right? And you are, right?
I was. I'm not now. I do not represent the United States.
I know. We'll go back to that later. We're being recorded. Don't worry about it, big boy.
With a private nonprofit.
But good for you, and a very good one, by the way. But if you had a chance to redo this, and if you were the secretary, like what would you do different, or what would you do? I'd be curious.
Well, let me go back a little bit. I mean, I guess another good question, Pat. I'm stumped. Let me go back to the last question just for a second.
Sure.
There's a couple of ways to do this, right? I mean, we're used to talking to employers, getting a sense of what employers need, right? So let's look at the labor market information. Let's look at labor market data. Let's validate that data with a set of employers. Let's get 10 hotels together or 10 hospitals together, take a sector's approach to this, right? Convene, talk to them as groups, or you may have to do it individually, depends, and find out what their needs are going to be. I mean, I'll never forget this time when I was a local workforce director. I brought all the 4 hospitals and 10 long-term care facilities together for a conversation about what they needed. Well, I had the labor market information there that said they needed this, that, and the other, but they said, oh, we'll get that. We need unit clerks. We need people who know how to do this. We need this in the next year or two. So you really got to ask the right questions and find out where the demand's going to be. And then, whose responsibility, your question really is whose responsibility? Should it be the apprenticeship program? So you look at the North America building trades, right? The godfather of the building trades industry. And they're creating apprenticeship readiness courses because they've recognized the need to create more pathways in. But other folks do it too. Workforce boards do it in West Michigan and down in North Carolina and other places. And so, I think everything's got to be driven by employers. That's where the demand side is. That's nothing new. But the more data and information validation we have of that, we can then craft a program. So look, we know there's going to be some manufacturing positions. We talked to our manufacturers. They're going to need CNC operators. They're going to need logistics people. They're going to need truck drivers, whatever, right? And then you can build it off of that. The ideal way to do it, I think, is to do it with a group of employers. And so they're having input into the pathway into the registration. But even with your local apprenticeship programs that have been there a while, like the carpenters or the engineers or HVAC or the elevator, and this is really hard to do, but to create the partnerships with them. So you say, look, we're going to go ahead and do this. What is your need? Can you help us? And, all we want to do is have a partnership with you. So you'll interview anybody who completes this program successfully. It's a no-lose proposition for some of them. So one is creating those contacts and new things with new employers and new industries. And the other is, and I talk to local groups about this all the time, don't forget the programs you've already got going on in your community.
Right.
and see what sort of relationships you can develop. It may be a
Right.
challenge, but you may be able to get some going on.
So
Pat,
Sheila,
are
I'm
you
curious what you
trying
think.
to-
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Are you trying to develop a clearer understanding of how we build bridges into apprenticeship? Was
Yes,
that the point of your question?
it is.
Yeah, yeah. Because I totally hear you. I totally hear you around the need to have, for lack of a better word, an intermediary function that may translate the skills that are required or the cultural norms or the context, that is needed to be successful in apprenticeship. And so it takes some burden off the apprenticeship program, at the
Right.
same time creating some pathways and bridges into the program so that people can just understand and translate. Is that what you're
Yeah, I
getting
mean,
at?
let me just give you a real live anxiety moment I have in Philadelphia right now is that,
Mhm.
we have industries at hotel and entertainment that have been decimated by COVID.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We got thousands of individuals that need another, industry, because I think we all are looking at and reading stuff that, business travel is not going to pick up till 24,
That's right.
or
Mhm.
places. So, I'm trying to look at from a workforce perspective, how do we get individuals that don't have much understanding of what some of these apprenticeships are, and do they need that pre-apprenticeship? So that was really my question.
Yeah, no, I think so, right? And especially when you're talking about skills transfer and especially moving from very different industries,
Yeah.
into other specific ones. Yeah, you need a translator and a guide, right? To help you understand one, why do my skills transfer? Like I don't even understand that, right? Am I going to be able to do this? Is there a safe space for me to try it out, and figure out whether this thing is for me before I invest all this time and energy in it? No, I think absolutely. Absolutely.
So Eric, yeah, you fire away, buddy.
I was just going to say, Sheila mentioned intermediaries,
Mhm.
and the fact that you all are doing this week's conference meeting for a lot of partners and or people you could be partnered with more. I mean, it's really important that we have this shared view of what we can use pre-apprenticeship for leading into registered apprenticeship, right? So, what is program design you're going to do? Is everybody on the same page? Are you saying similar things to employers? And do you have a really good understanding of that? We'll see where pre-apprenticeship goes, right, Pat? I mean, there may be a lot more interest in it, and I think there should be. We may get to a critical mass and be fine, but I still think there's folks that are going to need that. And Sheila nailed it. It's not just young people, but it's
Right.
all these laid off workers choosing to go where they
So
need.
Eric, is there any anxiety around, we're going to have hopefully all this money into apprenticeships? And I guess sometimes I worry a little bit that we're going to put all this public money in. And then if the public money dries up, what happens to the model? Like, do those employers who say, thank you very much for the money to offset my cost of training or offset my cost of wages? But how do we make sure, how do we develop with some confidence that this doesn't become, always, a public investment?
Well, it's an excellent point, right? And to me, it's not about the investment in the funds first, right? It's about the will of the state, the feds, the locals, your board, the board of the nonprofits and community-based organizations are going to do it, that sort of say, we believe this is a great strategy. Forget about the money. We believe this is a good strategy. We believe it's much more effective in this world today to build a workforce, not to go out on the market and buy one. We want to train people the way we want to. We realize they may not be productive as much as we'd like in year one, but man, in year two, they are. We're going to pay them a little bit less to come in, but we'll reinvest that into their training. So, it's really important that everybody in your ecosystem, if you will, gets on the same page about this. So we're not saying different things to employers, that we all have a certain standard.
Right.
Your ambassadorship program that is really putting you all on the map in Pennsylvania, is another good way of doing that and training other people within your system to do that work, right? And we walk the talk and what have you. So I just think it's real important that all the partners are organized together. That's why meetings like this week are important. You all have the same set of standards and knowledge about pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship, and that you all are not divvying up, but there's certain populations some groups work with better than others. And certain strategies that the board will do that somebody else can't do, or somebody else can do that the board can't do, right? So
Yeah, so I'm going to jump on a
Yeah, I'm
question
sure.
from one of our panelists.
Let me say
This is
something.
for you, Sheila. This
Wait a
is
minute,
good-
wait.
Whoa.
Well, just one thing, right? I gotta think, I have to do this.
You are in charge, by
This
the way.
is the
So
Sheila
when we
and
look at
Pat
the
show.
structure of who
Yeah, you're
reports
not
to
in
who,
Eric, it's
control, Pat.
I
always the
technically
Sheila and
report
Pat
to
show,
you. So
right?
you
Right.
go.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to add one thing, right? I think we have to recognize the moment we're in economically, right? So in times of prosperity, I think people think, am I going to make this investment? But I think if we could change the language that we use around apprenticeship outcomes to say, how has this improved your bottom line, right? How has this improved your turnover, right? What did you get for your investment in it? Those that want to win in this business battle will understand that they need to maintain that investment. One of my favorite books is The Good Job Strategy. Zenit Tom, she's out of Cornell, Dartmouth. She just compares Costco and Walmart. And she talks about organizations that invest in their employees and how much more profitable they are than Walmart. Yes, Walmart is the giant, but Costco is more profitable, and it's because of their investment in wages and professional development of their employees. And I think organizations that want to win, right? If we can continue the dialogue that says, this is not just about getting people in place, this is about your winning, right? That's a different conversation that I think will allow the investment to continue post our startup money. And I think we need to be clear about our money as startup money, right? Not as operational money.
Right. So I will say that you're brilliant, because you are, because you just answered the question before I gave you the question, right?
Yay.
So the
We're done,
question
Eric.
so the question from Stu, right? So we have Stu Bass. So Stu's another colleague that's been doing this work a number of years. And his question was, how do you sustain it after the grant funding? And I think you make a great point. How do we make the business case? Not just how many people enrolled and how many people are still working, but how do you make the business case? Because that's the language of businesses, right? It's not the language of workforce people to say, thank you for taking 20 people. It really should be, what did the value of this program do for your long-term sustainability?
Yeah, this is a really tricky issue for me, and I really have two minds about it, right? One of the first things employers often ask us, a new employer will be, oh, well, do you have any funds to give us? Right. And, part of me wants to say, hey, employer, you're the beneficiary of this outstanding sort of program. You need to put some skin in the game, but I don't do that. And many ways, if you got to bribe an employer with a grant or money to do it, it's like, that's the wrong way to do it, right? The employer should really want to do it, but I'm also not Pollyannish, and stupid either, right? So,
Not at all.
funds to incentivize employers are a good thing. What I believe makes the difference, and this is a lesson learned from South Carolina, they give $1,000 tax credit to every apprentice. But the employers don't do it for the tax credit. They do it because they get such incredible customer service from the South Carolina Technical College system and their network of apprenticeship experts, right? And they will come to their office and they'll crank out an apprenticeship set of standards, work process schedule for one worker or for 20 workers. And so the customer service with employers really makes the difference. But, to Stu's question, or to the question at hand, look, what are really the costs of apprenticeship, right? The costs of the training, and we don't want apprentices to pay. The costs are a little bit of supervision, but if you hire somebody, they're already going to get supervised, right? So there's really not cost. You're bringing them in a little bit of a lower wage. So you can, instead of starting them at $18 an hour, maybe you start them at $15 an hour, and you use that $3 an hour savings to cover their costs of the training, right? But, I like the idea of you looking at it, Sheila, as it's startup, defray the costs of startup, but employers got to get in the game, right? And you might want to bring that up to them later in your conversation, but they're going to be the beneficiaries to build their workforce. And as you will see, because this is true 100% of the time, once an employer has done an apprenticeship, they're your best spokesperson. They'll do it for the long term. And for the most part, they love it. Right. So, that's the
So
money.
Sheila,
The
Sheila,
money.
how easy is it?
Hold on, Pat, I'm talking here.
Oh my, oh my.
I'm just kidding.
I know you are.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the employers, gosh, Pat, now I'm got all
See,
confused.
that's what happens.
Restricted
See?
him.
Focus,
Why?
focus. Don't tell me that's a senior moment. Focus.
Totally a senior moment. My anxiety taking me over.
Exactly. Well, you can pause for a second because then I'll ask Sheila this question. So Sheila,
Yeah.
as one of the primary architects of the system in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
how do you make sure this connection works, like this long-term sustainability works? Because I think we know budgets change a lot, and we know COVID's been really hard on a lot of state budgets and city budgets. But from your perspective, because you are so brilliant, like how do you build this in?
So
I
I
thought that
think
was a setup
again,
question, huh? Woo.
yeah, well, I know. I was just like, wow, no softballs today.
Exactly.
But I would say this, right? Oftentimes I think it's the language we use, right? So we're in
Right.
this moment where we're talking about how we talk about things, right? And so, apprenticeship, I think, has survived because even though the language sometimes is this is the new kind of approach we're going to use to the same thing that we've been doing, I think we have to have language that persists beyond, our fascination with the new bright and shiny thing, right? It's a strategy that's been around forever. It has been effective forever. It has been limited to certain industries until more recent times, but we have to use it as part of our strategy. So, like, I'll share with you one thing that we're fixing, at the Commonwealth. And as you know, at the Pennsylvania Career Links, we use a referral system through CWDS. But there's apprenticeship is a nice too, not part of the referral system. So we are fixing that so that it is an automatic decision about where people should go, as opposed to today I remembered apprenticeship. Those kinds of like imbibing structures in the system that make it one of the things that you think about automatically as a workforce development strategy is one of the ways that you do that, right? As opposed to it being a nice to, because today, I remembered how wonderful Cheryl is and I want to send someone to her program. You know what I mean, right? It should be part of the way we do business. And once we build those structures, now you have a different proposition.
Right.
Right.
So Eric, what do you think? So you worked at many different levels. I'm assuming that, even at the federal level, they want to see that commitment from employers as well. So how would you build that in?
Well, there's been various efforts over the years, right? In your Whova OJT programs, it's cost sharing, right? Some incumbent worker training programs we do, it's cost sharing. We'll give you 50% if the employer kicks in 50%. And I think that's fair, right? And I think that's a great incentive to employers to know that the state or the county or the grant or the program is working with them. And also get them used to thinking that they got to put some skin in the game. So when the grant ends, to Stu's question, it's not see you later, alligator. Now, there's a lot of that in this country, that when you get your grant and 3 years later, you're done and you're done. I think apprenticeship could be, it's both challenging, but could be a little bit easier than traditionally, because the costs you're passing on to the employer, and there's various ways to handle this, is right, as I said earlier, the training, a little bit of mentorship, and a few other things, but it's not a huge amount of money. But basically, it's how do you get the cost covered of the training, right? Which is not an outrageous amount. So many employers do it themselves. Zurich Insurance, Aon, they're covering the full cost of it, right? Yeah. Some are paying for it with Whova dollars, not a lot, but some are. Some use Pell Grants, some use state grants to do that. So, but how do you sustain that? That is an issue. I gotta think, and this is, I think, been most of my experience, when employers start to do it and start to own it and see the success, they will often just continue that themselves because they realize they can absorb the costs. And where they're also saving money with a 94% retention rate in apprenticeship, the lack of churn.
That's right.
in that also saves them money. So I think there's a return on not only the investment, there's a return, for the skills that they're getting as well.
So we have a couple minutes to go before we have Councilwoman Gilmore's video to show. So I want to kind of think of a little wrap up here. So what would you say to the audience that are practitioners or employers? Like, Sheila, I'm gonna let you go first. So what would your message be to them?
So I would say, core workforce, sometimes we have a tough road to hoe, as we are trying to get employers to cooperate with us with programs, right? But I would say to you that, for the employer partners, at least that I have worked with, right? While they want to do the right thing and they understand the social covenant involved with being a business in Philadelphia, et cetera, right? You got to have this opportunity to speak with them in terms of their interest and their return on investment. Employers have said to me, you know what, Sheila, look, if you build a program that gets me the talent that I need, I will work with you. But I'm not here to fix social injustice or any of the other things that need to be done. But we are willing to partner to move in that particular direction, because at the end of the day, we're here to be in business and to make money, right? And so I think we have to shift our dialogue, like sometimes, Pat, you heard me refer to it as, I'm odds, right? And a lot of times employers, they don't need to see what goes on behind the curtain. You know what I mean, right? Well, all they need to do is know that I am providing you with people who are as or more qualified than the folks you can get on your own. Right. And I think if we take that position with employers, they're more than ready to partner, but if we take the position that says, please take Sheila, she just needs a little bit of help, without the mechanisms in place to help them, they find it a liability. And like I said, as the HR director, my job is to stop liability in its tracks.
Right.
So I'm going to now hop to the wizard of workforce development, Eric.
Yep. That's you, Eric.
Look, to answer your question, I think we need to be smart, targeted, and well-informed. We've got to know how to talk to employers. I think Sheila's point is so important. You're not approaching employers saying, oh, gee, help us out with these poor clients of ours. Yeah, we're in the people business, as S. King, shared with us in the chat. But people business means we understand what employers need. We know how to talk to employers. And the biggest thing we can do is do the heavy lifting for the employers. So, and this goes back to Sheila's point about intermediaries or workforce board people or anybody, right? Can you do the standards with an employer? Can they give you some information? Can you do the standards? Can you hook up with a community college or some other training provider? Can you do the heavy lifting and be the facilitator of that program with the employer leading the way, right? And so as much heavy lifting as we as program people can do for those employers, that's great. But we got to be smart and targeted. We got to know how to it sounds terrible, but I don't want to say talk employers into it, but yeah, talk employers into it. Make the argument about building your workforce. Make the argument about growing your own workers with the skills you really want them to have. That you can control the time frame, whether it's a year, 2-year, 3-year apprenticeship. What are the skills that they need? What are the credentials and certifications, right? And better yet, if you can do that with a group of employers in the same industry sector, so they can feel like they're collaborating and not cannibalizing each other's workforce that goes down the street for $2 an hour more. So, we just got to be smart. And you people out there who are knocking on doors and talking to employers, we got to get really good at that. That makes it or breaks it at the end of the day, that we sound like we know what we're talking about, that we're offering them a good alternative. And my biggest advice is, we have worked with employers, Stu will tell you, it may take you 6, 8, 10 months to get them to yes, it may take you a year. That's right. To get them to yes, right? And
this is a marathon, right? So this is not your quick attachment program and off you fly. This is a marathon when it comes to educating, employers and even job seekers and staff who work with job seekers. Like, how do we all begin to understand the value of people in the work in which employers embrace? And I think that will be our ongoing challenge for larger networks like in Philadelphia and other big cities, is how do we get staff on the front lines to, one, be able to articulate this better, whether it's business engagement or whether it's, job seeker recruitment. So I think we're just about out of time. I can't thank you guys enough, both Sheila and Eric. Maria, I'm going to hand it back to you. Are there any other questions, Maria, that maybe you were listening that we didn't answer? Because I thought Eric and Sheila did an amazing job. Not surprising, because, you know, you put together the panel.
I think the one question I missed is whether or not you want to start an apprenticeship for panel moderators, Patrick.
Well, I do think I have another career in front of me, and I do think at some point there'll be some comedian podcast, even though my wife doesn't think I'm funny at all, which is unfortunate because it's been 28 years. But
Yeah,
you know,
she's not alone, Pat.
what are you gonna do? So it's nice to know we can always pick the people we invite back, Maria, because I think, you know.
We kid because we love. We kid.
Well,
because we love.
we definitely want Sheila back because she'll have the money. So we love Sheila. We can't get enough of Sheila. That's for sure.
So I just want to say thank you so much. That was fantastic. I really appreciated the depth and perspective of the conversation. I want to have a moment to share a video from Councilwoman Gilmer Richardson, who took the time to sort of share her perspective and celebrate the work. We've had a community of over 80 folks joining us today and over 270 joining us over the past week, which is pretty extraordinary. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And,
by the way, Councilwoman Richardson is an amazing person who really is beginning to push City Council in this direction. So off we go.
Good evening. I'm Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson, and I'm currently serving in my first term as a member of Philadelphia City Council. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the Apprenticeship PHL Symposium. I first want to thank all of Apprenticeship PHL partners for their investment in this important initiative, and I want to especially thank the team at PhilaWorks, including Maria Del Mar Cabaya, for putting together 2 weeks of incredible programming. As we all know, this has been a tough year. Our economy has struggled to deal with the impacts of COVID-19, and we have seen now how small the safety net is for many of our neighbors. This has been especially clear in Philadelphia, where tens of thousands of people have lost work, primarily in low-wage service sectors. But we also know many people are struggling to hire. Before the pandemic and even throughout it, sectors that require skilled or certified labor have called attention to the lack of workers who are prepared to fill the jobs in their industries. A significant number of jobs in Philadelphia are available to workers who take part in training programs of all kinds, but many people don't know about the opportunities available or don't know where to go to receive the proper training and certifications. Apprenticeship programs can fill this gap by offering debt-free education and job placement with local employers. There are apprenticeships in thousands of different occupations, and over 150,000 companies nationwide participate in apprenticeship programs. An apprenticeship is a model that truly benefits everyone. Businesses see a high return on investment, workers see significantly more money over their careers, and our economy benefits by having a highly skilled workforce that can lead to future business development and makes us more attractive to companies looking at Philadelphia. The trades are a perfect example of how this model has worked. Union apprenticeship programs offer paid training, benefits, guaranteed employment, and career-long access to advanced education and skills development. We need to learn from unions and figure out how we can create more opportunities for partnership across sectors. Luckily, we have great organizations in this region that are thinking innovatively and collaborating on how we can meet the challenges of the future. The Apprenticeship PHL Symposium has moved us forward by creating space for many of the conversations employers, sponsors, and practitioners need to have. Now we need to take these collaborations to the next step. As we build back from COVID-19, we need to think about how we can move more people into pathways for skilled, family-sustaining, and supporting work. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you to create partnerships that can help us achieve that goal. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thanks. Is that me, Maria? I'm ready now? Oh, I've been waiting for this all
Yes,
day.
sir.
This is probably one of my most exciting things to do today, besides hanging out with Eric and Sheila. I mean, look, brilliant people. But when you get a chance to really recognize true talent, someone that has been doing the work on the front line for so many years, I am so thrilled to say that we have created a Apprenticeship Champion Award on behalf of Apprenticeship PHL. And the person that we're going to award the first ever award to is Cheryl Feldman. As we all know, Cheryl has been an amazing designer of apprenticeships, 13 overall, innovative, 43 years at District 1199C. She must have came right out of grade school. 18 years as executive director of that great organization. And we're blessed to have her in Philadelphia. I've had a chance, as Eric would say, and Sheila, she is nationally recognized. And, Philadelphia loves to talk about its own. And we are thrilled that she accepted this award because she is also very humble, right? So I think the other thing we all know about Cheryl, she's smart, energetic, positive, but also humble. And I think that's a great trait too. But we are thrilled because we really wanted to give Cheryl an opportunity to talk today because, we love to talk about her, but we also want to, let her have a chance to say a little bit about, why this work has been so important to her. And we're also thrilled to know that she's retiring, but we all know what that means, that she's not really retiring. So we're thrilled the fact that she's still going to stay active in some capacity. But Cheryl, just, once again, congratulations. I had a chance to talk about you at our board meeting a couple months ago, but this is a more thrilling opportunity because it really talks about the dedicated work you've done for a number of years. So Cheryl, I'm going to hand it off to you and now you can talk. It's all good. And I'll be quiet, which most people will be like, thank God. So I'm actually going to mute myself, so that'll even help.
You're on mute.
Thanks, Patrick. You've been more than generous, and I really appreciate the recognition, especially from colleagues. It means a lot to me. I also want to recognize the great work Maria and Cassandra did putting these 2 weeks together, promoting apprenticeship. When I think back when we began this work, in the early 2010s, 2014s in Philadelphia, we were a much different place than now. And seeing all the new folks interested in apprenticeship is so exciting. And thank you to Sheila and Eric for your leadership, just amazing leadership in Pennsylvania and nationally. But I did want to take a few minutes. I prepared for some remarks because I think my career is one that really highlights what's possible, and I'm hoping it motivates others as well. When I think about my 4 decades working at the training fund, I really was able to merge my career with my life mission. I don't know if many of you have had that opportunity, but for me, that's been so amazing. To focus on impacting systems change as part of my work for the last 4 decades, especially from a labor management perspective, has been amazing. I walked into 1199C as, yes, a young woman in my 20s, and how lucky I was to have all of this time working with an amazing labor leader, Henry Nicholas, a true champion of education, and my predecessor, some of you knew Jim Ryan, who I just learned a tremendous amount from. Their vision became my vision, which was to create a quality worker-centered education and workforce program that opened its doors not just to 1199C members, but to all Philadelphians and all Pennsylvanians. And that was unusual for a labor union to do that. And one that I really, I really treasure that vision was there. When Henry Nicholas started walking around The hospitals in the late 60s and early 70s, he would tell the story that he couldn't find any Black or brown RNs at all. And maybe if he was lucky, he found one on the night shift, hidden away. And so he became committed to changing that scenario. And the training fund was the vehicle for doing that. The training fund was created in 1974. And its trust agreement stated that the purpose of the fund was to address the workforce needs of the industry, not of just the 1199 labor partners and employer partners, but the industry. And that was visionary. It opened up our opportunities to serve union, non-union employers in the industry, and really open up our programs to all Philadelphians. I became a believer of apprenticeship during the Obama administration, and Eric was part of that journey. When first hearing President Obama and Labor Secretary Tom Perez promote the idea of non-traditional apprenticeship programs, I just became a believer. And we began our first community health apprenticeship in 2014. And from there expanded to the 13 approved apprenticeship programs in a very short time. What was interesting was the ability, because apprenticeship is such a flexible model, to integrate the training fund's approach to workforce within the apprenticeship model. And so we used it as a vehicle to create career paths that resulted in credentials, college credits, degree attainment, to implement bridge programming to support academic success, wraparound counseling, technical assistance for employers. And we were just blessed to have the support of the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Council. And thank you, Sheila, for continuing that leadership. With that, making use of that wonderful ambassador model, we've now created a statewide early childhood apprenticeship program. It has 7 regional hubs around the state, over 9 higher ed institutions, over 50, 60 employers, more than 150 apprentices, and there is so much excitement. That's the work that I'm continuing on in my retirement. I just can't let it go. It's just too exciting. And so I'm continuing to support the growth of that ambassador work. None of this could have happened with just 1199. I mean, this was a partnership that we wanted to build, that we really invested in building. We are so thankful to Jim Fody, to the US DOL. The Regional Apprenticeship Office here is just awesome. Patrick, your leadership has been awesome. It's been just incredible to work with you at the end of my career, having worked with you earlier in my career, just incredible. I just can't say enough about the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry and the Apprenticeship Council. We've also been just the amazing recipient of so much Department of Education dollars to build into those workforce programs, which has been amazing. The public and philanthropic funders, Lenfest and William Penn and Vanguard and Heinz Foundation, Kellogg Foundation. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Citizens Bank has been a great contributor. Just so many wonderful partners. I would say, though, my most rewarding work has been with the employer partners. They've been indispensable to this model. And our board, Inglis, Temple, Jefferson, Chop, Crozier, so many fantastic board members at the training fund. And then, of course, we've had fantastic employer partners. SPIN has been amazing, implementing both our behavioral health and ECE apprenticeship programs, JEVS, behavioral health and addictions, so many incredible employers. Can't do it without the higher eds. It's all a partnership. Apprenticeship is a partnership. Workforce development is a partnership. So higher ed partners, policy partners. You know, Eric, Jobs for the Future documented our work over so many years. That documentation was so important to creating a sense of what this model was. National Skills Coalition raised the model nationally. We had input to the 2015 Whova legislation, a chance to talk to Vice President Biden directly. I mean, just incredible national work. And then the AFL-CIO, for those of you who don't know, is an incredible policy partner, leadership partner as well. So many amazing partners. I've been so thankful. The training fund staff's been amazing. They work really hard. They've had critical input to program design and implementation. And I'm thrilled to pass on the leadership to a new executive. Teresa Collins is deeply committed to providing opportunity to those in need. And her commitment to the training fund and ensuring that all of our programs are deeply focused on equity, her strong leadership skills will surely move the training fund forward. So my wish for each of you is that you receive as much meaning and fulfillment as I've had in my work. I've been blessed, and I hope that you are as well. And I thank each of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, and you wonder why we make you the champion, right? You wonder why, in your own words, we've been able to listen and think, wow, the thousands of people whose lives have been changed because of your work.
Thank you, Pat.
Right? And you just multiply that out, right? To families and siblings and young people. So you have set the bar high for our champion award. You've also set the bar high for us to continue your passion. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that's participated over the past week and a half. Another thank you. I can't thank Maria and Cassandra enough. Unfortunately, Meg was not able to make it today, but she's also a major driver in what we're trying to accomplish here at the Philadelphia Workforce Board, along with my executive staff. I've been fortunate and blessed to work with really smart people. And as Cheryl mentioned, we had a chance to work many, many years ago. And when I was able to be lucky enough to have this current position, I was thrilled that I had Cheryl on the board, I had Sheila on the board, just really fortunate to have really smart people. So Cheryl, once again, congratulations, well-deserved. Enjoy retirement. I mean, it sounds like you're busy already, but I hope you do a little bit of fun things, right? Pandemic is a little challenging, but Cheryl, you can have fun. It's okay. If not, Sheila will take you out on the town and paint it red, or maybe Eric will. But, Maria, I'm going to hand it back to you. Once again, thank you, everybody. I know Maria wants to do a couple closing remarks and follow up, but Cheryl, once again, thank you to all of our Apprenticeship PHL partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl was my introduction to apprenticeship. I remember her coming to my office and being like, can you take a look at this curriculum? Can we go through it? And she was talking about validating, and I was kind of getting along, but you were my introduction to apprenticeship, and you've turned me into a firm believer. So thank you for all that you've done and all that you continue to do. It's exciting to see what people do after they don't have to do 9 to 5. So I want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to the 17 APHL member organizations for their ongoing support. Thank you to each one of the APHL members who humored us and participated in meeting after meeting to think about who should speak, how should we structure this, how do we make this be engaging despite, well, COVID and the fact that we all miss handshakes and hugs. Thank you to all of our presenter recruitment folks. So appreciate all of your help and willingness to share your network and make connections. And thank you to every single one of our extraordinary presenters, moderators, and panelists. We couldn't have done this without you. This is in order of appearance, not importance. And then lastly, on the chat, you're going to get a feedback form. We hope to do this annually. And so we want to know how you would like us to do this moving forward in terms of topic, format, and overall anything else. We will also send that to you by email in case you don't get a chance to respond right now. And then I want to share a little bit of some coming soon. This is a beginning, not an end. And so we will be launching the new APHL website that is much more comprehensive and evolving as we continue to evolve our efforts in the city. And on May 12th, 11 to 12, save the date, we've got our follow-up APHL quarterly event where we're going to have some fabulous representation from the state's ATO, and hopefully continue this conversation and this opportunity for us to connect with each other. Continue to connect with us. Please follow us, tweet us, do the thing that you do on social media and Cassandra knows all about. And if you want to spend some quality time with us, feel free to find some time on the doodle chat that Cassandra just put on the calendar. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for spending your valuable time. I know that you're jumping from Zoom to Zoom. So appreciate you. And thank you to Cassandra and Patrick for coming along for the ride.
It's been great. And I don't think, I think, listening to Sheila and Eric and Cheryl, there's no more important time than now. I think we are in a crisis that we've never seen in our lifetime, but we're going to come out of it stronger, better, and these programs is what lift people up. So I just want to say, Sheila, I'm going to give you the last word because, we love you at the state. So we just want to give you the last minute to send us flying.
I am so glad you gave me the last minute because it would kill me if I didn't congratulate Cheryl. Just like, I'm over here trying to be good team player, right? But I was like, Cheryl, we love you. Oh my goodness. I mean, we can't, I think Pat did a wonderful job of talking about the contribution that you have made over the years to Philadelphia. And, as I told you, when I heard you were retiring, I was like, job well done. Yes, you deserve it. But, oh, I'm so sad for us. So I'm glad you're not really retiring, right? And still helping us in this space, right? What an icon and what such great work, right? Just can't thank you enough. But Pat, thank you for this week. I mean, thank you for moving into apprenticeships in the way that you have and really supporting it, understanding this is the direction that we want to go in and elevating this conversation around what it is that we want to do. Real leadership, bud. I'm not going to give you too many compliments.
Yeah, okay.
You know that the screen is only this big, right?
Well, I don't do it without really good staff. So look, I'm blessed to have staff. And I see Eric, he's dying to get a last word in too. So Sheila, are you done? You're my friend, so you can speak as long as you want.
I'm done.
You're done.
No, I'm
okay.
done.
All right, Eric, you got about 30 seconds, buddy.
I wasn't dying to get a word in other than to pay my honor to Cheryl. She has been just unbelievable. And I remember doing an event up there a few years ago where the walls in their office are adorned with these incredible photographs of really important people. It could also be a walk through Black History Month as well, and just some really incredible work that organization has done. And Cheryl has given a voice. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Sheila. It's been a great work. JFF looks forward to continue to work with all of you. Thank you.
We love you guys. Have a great weekend. Enjoy. Have some fun. It is Valentine's weekend. It's also President's weekend. Go have some fun, laugh, but be safe. Remember, double mask now. We're on to the double mask. Take care.